Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. Everyone watching apart from myself will be muted during the webinar, so if you have any questions, can you please type them in the Q&A box and I'll then answer all of them at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. This is me. You won't be actually seeing me live today, only hearing me. As it mentions, I'm a chartered financial planner and a registered life planner, and more about that later. I haven't got a glass of something sparkling with me at the moment, only some water, but possibly you have. I'll wait until after we've finished, I think. So, welcome everyone. We first did a presentation with this title 1 year ago in June 2020. Little did we know we'd still be subject to restrictions 1 year later. We've learned a lot of new words and phrases since then. Furlough, lockdown, herd immunity, R number, social distancing, support bubble, to name but a few. A market research organisation called Acquia actually did some research to find out what the top 3 irritating COVID-related phrases were with the British public, and they were these. We're all in this together, which 25% of people found irritating. The new normal, that's my personal unfavourite. And unprecedented times. So just to think about those 3, are we all in this together? My experience with clients who either have continued in regular employment or have a regular guaranteed source of income is that they've accumulated money as lack of opportunity to spend during lockdown. Plenty of people have struggled, however, hospitality and travel industries to name but 2, and predominantly younger people, and those without a decent place to live without outside space. The new normal, as I said, my unfavourite. Wikipedia defines it as a state to which an economy, society, etc. settles following a crisis when this differs from the situation that prevailed prior to the start of the crisis. It's been employed before, it's not new. World War I, financial crisis of the 2007-2008, September the 11th, the 2008 to 2012 recession, and of course COVID-19 is only the latest. Do you anticipate that when this is over, the pandemic will have changed daily life for most people? What about unprecedented times? Yes, we are in unprecedented times, but thinking back over my lifetime, every year, every decade has been different from the one before, quite different in some cases. It's just that the pace of change has been so rapid during the last 15 months or so, and we're dealing with things we haven't had to deal with before. So every day is a school day. So this is what I like to go through with you today. A little bit of history first. Then how you can plan to ensure you achieve financial independence so you have a choice to retire or not. How much will you need to retire? Types of retirement provision. Some of the emotional and practical aspects of retirement. And how we as financial planners can help you through that transition to retirement. And new possibilities. What shape will your retirement take? And obviously what we're all trying to do is plan for a secure future at some time in the future when hopefully things will be better than they are today. And then I'll finish with some actions to take away. So let's start with the background to retirement planning and a little bit of history first. Retirement as a government policy in the Western world was only really adopted in the late 19th to the early 20th century, so it's a fairly modern concept. Before that, you either worked until you dropped or just depended on your family to keep you, unless you were rich, of course. So the first state pension in the world was introduced in Germany in 1883. And it was paid from age 70 when male life expectancy was actually less than 70. So they didn't expect to pay it to that many people. It changed to age 65 in 1916 and has largely stayed at that age around the Western world until fairly recently. And retirement was more to do with your ability to carry out work than your life expectancy. Basically, you worked until you dropped. So what's the current situation? Many clients that we see say they want to start full-time work in their late 50s or early 60s, or even earlier. That's to a background of the current median life expectancy being 86 for men and 88 for women. By 2045, that's expected to be 89 for men and 91 for women. The statistics haven't been updated for 2021 yet, so we don't know how these figures will be affected by COVID. But the recent Marmot report did say that life expectancy was decreasing in deprived areas, but seemed to be holding steady in more affluent areas. And the first person to live to 150 is said to be alive today. The state pension age in the UK is currently 66. It's increasing to 67 and then later to 68 in stages. 60 to 70 is, in my mind, very much young old age, especially as I'm in that zone myself. I'd like to think that old is always at least 10 years older than I am. But the point of these statistics is to show that people retiring today, particularly if they're retiring early, is they're likely to have a third of their life still ahead of them. So a lot of time, possibly 30 to 40 years. So welcome to the third age. So retirement, full or part-time, is a time for new possibilities. Time for a rethink of your priorities in life, which will be different for everyone. You're aiming for financial independence, so you can either work or not work as you choose to. You'll have different priorities. Everyone will have different priorities. Some people will have a bucket list. If you do, my advice is don't leave it too late. And it will usually be experiences on the bucket list rather than things or acquiring stuff. Lockdown certainly reminded me that circumstances outside our control may prevent us from doing the things we've always wanted to do. It may be your own health, the death of a loved one, or mere lack of funds that stop you from reaching your goal. You may want to take on a new role. It might be a part-time job, say, in a different field, or it might be voluntary work. You might want to do something completely different. You might want to go to university. I've had clients who studied physics at one point, now want to do a history degree. Psychology seems very popular. A lot of interest there in studying in people in the third age. Have you always wanted to start a new venture? You might want to start a new business or have a sort of brilliant idea for a new computer game or something like that. I've certainly come across that. Or do you just want to start working altogether? Nothing wrong with that. You may well have other interests that you want to follow, be it sporting or cultural. You may want to spend more time with grandchildren or be actually looking after grandchildren while children work. You may want to travel. Obviously a bit difficult recently, but hopefully will open up again soon. So down to the nitty-gritty. How much will you need? The Pensions and Lifetime Saving Association carried out a big piece of work in 2019 with Loughborough University to put some actual figures behind what sort of sum you need to have a comfortable retirement. And they defined 3 levels: a minimum need, which is fairly basic, a moderate income, and a comfortable income post-retirement. And these are those figures. The full single-tier state pension is now £9,339 a year. And it's anticipated that 85 to 90% of people will receive the full amount going forward. So the figures that they produced were a minimal annual income of £10,200 in retirement, which is state pension with just £861 a year more. To buy an annuity to provide that income would cost you about £18,000. A moderate annual income in retirement of £20,200, which gives you some more luxuries in life, is state pension plus £12,874. you need approximately £270,000 to buy an annuity of that amount. So it's a lot more than just the minimum income figure. But, and I'm sure most people are aspiring to at least a comfortable level of income in retirement, they're suggesting for a single person, £33,000 is what should achieve that. So that's state pension plus £28,000 plus a year. Now, to buy an annuity of that level is around £600,000. So it's 33 times as much as the minimum annual income. And as I said, the assumptions assume someone's receiving a full state pension, that they're buying an index-linked annuity bought at state pension age, which as we go later in the presentation, you'll see that's not always going to be the case, and that someone has average life expectancy. It's a single person, and if the figures don't add up, it's because at the higher levels, there will be income tax on the pension income. So what does a comfortable retirement look like? How do the PLSA define it? Financial freedom, some luxuries, £56 a week on food, a 2-year-old car every 5 years, 3 weeks holiday in Europe every year, presumably to green countries, £1,500 for clothes and footwear each year, a bit of renovation to your home every 10 to 15 years, £50 each time someone's got a birthday, and probably Christmas as well. It also assumes no mortgage or rent. So that's not always the case we find in retired people nowadays. So how do we set about helping clients plan for a comfortable retirement and achieving financial independence? Often as not, we'll start with a lifetime cash flow planning exercise. This short case study is based very loosely on myself and my husband's situation, although I've knocked a few years off our ages, a bit of artistic license there. As you can tell, I'm still working. I'm not in a hurry to stop because I really enjoy my work. My husband Keith is happily retired and has been for some years now. So let's say hello to Keith and Tina test. So this is the sort of cash flow graph that we would produce for clients. So my title here is taken from Dickens' David Copperfield. Mr. Micawber's actual words were, you probably remember, annual income £20, annual expenditure 19 and 6, result happiness. Annual income £20, annual expenditure £20 and sixpence, result misery. Mr. Micawber always lived in hopeful expectation that financially something would turn up. He realises somewhat late in the day that nothing is just going to turn up, and he ends up in debtor's prison. Just think if Mr. Micawber had consulted a financial planner, things might have turned out quite differently. At the start of this slide, both Keith and Tina are 57. Keith is already retired. Tina's working, but would like to retire at age 58, go on a few of those holidays if possible. Keith has a final salary pension already in payment. Tina has a smaller one with a normal retirement age of 60 and also has a personal pension. They like their holidays and would hope to spend about £15,000 per annum on travel, and they probably spend about £42,000 a year overall. There's currently some surplus income, according to the calculations, but that just tends to be spent rather than saved. And as in most financial matters, red is bad. And if the key is a bit hard to read, the green figures are the defined benefit pensions. The light blue is savings being used up fairly quickly. Dark blue is state pensions coming in from age 66. Orange is withdrawals from Tina's pension, which soon runs out. So not a very happy situation. We'd normally carry out a series of what-if exercise. This one is Tina not stopping full-time work until age 60 and some heavy saving into pension contributions for the next few years, some easing back on expenditure, and possibly Tina working part-time for a few years after 60. Position looks a lot rosier. We've got no red there for one start. So we can have those holidays again when we're allowed out. So I'd now like to move on to different types of retirement provision, how clients would typically be building up those retirement pots to provide them with income in retirement. The three main strands And the first strand is very much the state pension, which I've already mentioned, which is pretty much universal in the UK. And for a large proportion of the UK population, state pension is their main source of post-retirement income. So the full single-tier state pension is currently £179.60 per week, £9,339 per year. State pension age is 66 now. It'll be 67 if you're 50 plus now, 68 later. Currently rises annually in line with the so-called triple lock, which is the highest of inflation, average earnings, and 2.5%. How long will that last? We're not sure. This year is meant to be a bumper year for increases in average earnings because of problems with furlough, etc. So it may be that the triple lock goes when Rishi Sunak's looking for ways to save some money. You need 35 years of national insurance contributions to receive the full amount of state pension. The amount of state pension you get may be affected by being contracted out in earlier years. Contracted out was where you were able to pay a lower rate of national insurance contribution if you contracted out either by your pension scheme or a personal pension. And we always recommend that clients check their entitlement to state pension on the gov.uk website and make up missing years if there are gaps. Don't really need to do that until you're fairly close to your proposed retirement date, because every year where you're working, you will be getting credit for national insurance contributions. So the second strand to retirement income planning are what they call defined benefit pension schemes. Historically, the majority of workplace pensions were final salary pension schemes. A subclass of defined benefit pension schemes. And nowadays, life schemes of that type are mainly confined to the public sector, although plenty of people have deferred final salary schemes from past or even current employments, where employers have closed schemes. Most current schemes are now what are called care schemes, career average revalued earnings. So the benefits of retirement under both types of defined benefit scheme are defined by the rules of the scheme. So for example, with a final salary, typically the rules would say that you're entitled to a pension made up of a 60th of your final salary times the year of service. So for example, 40 years service would give you a pension of 40 60ths, that is 2/3 of your final salary, which is very good in the days when jobs were for life. The majority of ongoing schemes are now care schemes. These are probably a bit fairer as they don't penalise people who might want to step back from a higher paid to a lower paid role towards the end of their career. An amount of money is added to your eventual annual pension figure each year you work. In the example I've shown, which is actually the civil service pension scheme, civil service alpha pension scheme, 2.32% of your salary is added to your pension figure each year. So for example, in a tax year, if you had a salary of £10,000, £232 would be added to your eventual annual pension figure from normal retirement date, and that figure would be revalued in line with inflation each year. Still very good arrangement for long-term employees, as we will see later. In the public sector, we find that there are both funded and unfunded schemes. So funded schemes mean that there is a pot of money, a pot of investments behind the scheme, which supports the payment of benefits. Unfunded schemes, such as civil service, teachers, NHS schemes, are just paid, the benefits are paid from current taxation. In the private sector, every scheme would be a funded scheme, but as I mentioned, these are largely historical now. I'm not sure if there are any schemes, their final salary certainly, that allow new entrants at all. And they are very much the gold standard of pension schemes. you know, you're fortunate if you do have one of these type of schemes. So the features of defined benefit schemes. The investment risk lies with the employer, not the employee. You pay your contributions, you're promised a certain level of pension. Any shortfall in funding needs to be made up by your employer. The contribution level is fixed for the employee. It's variable for the employer. It's often tiered depending on the level of salary. The civil service scheme, which I gave the accrual rate for on the previous slide, most employees pay 5.35% of the salary. Higher earners pay more. Employees' tax relief for their contributions is via the net pay scheme, which means that their contributions are deducted from their pay before income tax is working out. Benefits entitlement can't be changed retrospectively, but future benefits can. I have a number of university employees as clients who are members of the university superannuation scheme. The terms of the scheme have been getting progressively worse and worse as time goes on, but they can't change the past. The trustees of the scheme can't change benefits that you've built up to until the time of the change. They can only change the accrual of benefits in the future, which obviously is true for life in general as well. So, taking benefits from a defined benefit pension scheme. At retirement, part of the pension can be commuted for a tax-free lump sum. Commuted means given up. You give up part of your pension in exchange for a tax-free lump sum at the outset. With some schemes, the lump sum is automatic. For example, the old-style teachers' pension scheme, the accrual rate for pension was 1/80th, so 40-year service would give 40/80ths or half final salary pension, plus 3/80ths lump sum, so 40-year service would give 1.5 times salary lump sum. Pension will be payable for the life of the scheme member, however long that is. And we've talked about people possibly living to 150 in the future, so pension could be paid for best part of 100 years for some people. Pension is likely to be inflation proofed. It depends on the scheme rules. CPI, Consumer Price Index, is more common than the older measure of Retail Price Index nowadays. The scheme is likely to include spouses and dependents' pensions, and it's likely to include guarantees if death occurs shortly after someone starts to take benefits. This all looks mighty complicated, and it is in reality, but nowadays most defined benefit pension schemes will have a dedicated members website where you can get lots of information, whether you're an active member of the scheme, a deferred member, or a pensioner member. I mentioned the university scheme previously, and they, for example, have a really useful modeler where you can get early retirement figures, etc. I personally am a member of the NatWest Group defined benefit scheme from a past employment, and their site is very clear and easy to follow. And I don't think I'm just saying that because I know about pensions. And with defined benefit schemes, there'll be an early retirement reduction if you start to take the pension before the scheme normal retirement date. Some schemes will have a normal retirement date of 60, but it's getting more common for schemes to have a normal retirement date that coincides with state pension age. So the thorny issue of defined benefit scheme transfers. Transfers for defined contribution to defined contribution schemes are only possible from funded schemes, which makes sense because there is actually a pot of money behind those schemes. The default position, as set up by the FCA and in practice, is that very much it's best to stay put. I would say you really need 3 very good reasons to transfer. You need to take regulated advice from an independent financial advisor if the transfer value is £30,000 or more, and most transfer values will be £30,000 or more. Some schemes allow partial transfers, which can be very good in some circumstances. But after transfer, all of the risk and all of the cost, for that matter, passes to the scheme member. So an overview of defined benefit schemes. They promise to pay an index-linked pension throughout lifetime, however long it is. There's a variety of death benefits included, be it a lump sum, be it dependents' pensions. You can keep track via the scheme member website. And what I would say is guaranteed regular income in retirement is vital for most people. And as a comment I would make, what's important to you at maybe 50 to 60 age group is unlikely to be the same as what's important to you at 80 or 90. What the majority of people live on is income, and getting a guaranteed monthly income throughout retirement is worth its weight in gold. From my experience, most people's desire and capacity to take investment risk and other sorts of risk reduces as they get older. If you're a current member or a deferred member of a defined benefit scheme, unless you're very wealthy and very ill health and have no dependents at all, it's very unlikely that it's going to be in your interest to transfer out of the scheme. We do see people come to us on the basis that they've seen a very large number for the transfer value for their defined benefit scheme and think they'd like that money under their control rather than the scheme trustees. And in those cases, we do, and are obliged to do, run through an education process first to explain the value of the benefits they've got already. I just remember the old fable of the goose that laid golden eggs. It laid a golden egg every day. The farmer decided to kill the goose to get all the remaining eggs all at once, but that stopped those daily eggs coming along altogether. So maybe look at any defined benefit scheme that you have as a golden goose, basically the gift that keeps on giving. And as I mentioned previously, try to think long term, not just short term. So the third strand of retirement planning will be defined contribution pension schemes. And the majority of pension provision in the private sector and in some parts of the public sector is now defined contribution. It's also known as money purchase. There are now widespread workplace schemes which all employers should offer, where the employer will pay in a fixed percentage of salary and the employee needs to pay a minimum percentage of salary but can pay more. The total minimum joint contribution currently needs to be 8% of salary between upper and lower limits. If you are self-employed or you have your own company, then you absolutely need to make your own pension provision. You haven't got an employer. And a secondary type of defined contribution scheme will be something called an additional voluntary contribution scheme, which often runs alongside a defined benefit pension scheme. You do, as with defined benefit schemes, get tax relief for contributions into the scheme, both as an employee and an employer, and these are also subject to limits, the lifetime and annual allowances, which I'm not going to go into in detail in this presentation. So how do you build up benefits in defined contribution schemes? Basically, you build up a fund of money that's invested and then accessed no earlier than age 55. The government has announced that this age 55 will increase as time goes on and should basically increase to 10 years earlier than state pension age. So will be 58 at some time in the future. You have investment options. The money that goes into your scheme needs to be invested. And workplace schemes and most personal pensions will actually have a default investment arrangement. These are often called lifestyle or target date funds. What that means, as an example, is that there will be a growth phase up to 10 years before your proposed retirement date, where the investments will be of a higher risk profile overall. And then in the pre-retirement phase, in the 10 years before retirement, the risk will be reduced gradually over time to avoid volatility leading up to your planned retirement date. You can select your own investments. You don't have to go to the default. The comment I've made there about being strategic, not tactical, is I would always recommend not going for whatever's flavour of the month or the year, but look at a well-diversified portfolio that's going to give you a good spread of investments and reduce your risk. And costs are very important. High costs from pension funds can cut a big hole into your pension fund. There is a more sophisticated option, SIP, self-invested personal pension, which allows a wider range of underlying investments, such as commercial property. And certainly company owners and self-employed will often use those for their retirement provision. So taking benefits from defined contribution schemes. It's possible to take up to 25% of your pension pot as tax-free cash, either all at the outset or in stages over a number of years. The remainder of the fund, apart from the tax-free cash, continues to be invested and is used to provide income in retirement. Historically, that fund had to be used to buy an annuity meaning that you paid a lump sum of money to an insurance company and they promised to pay you an income for life. Since we've had pension freedoms, flexible drawdown is available, where you can actually take regular monthly annual payments from the scheme or ad hoc payments as and when you want. Those payments after the tax-free cash will be taxable to income tax. So as an overview, most UK pension provision now and in the future will be by defined contribution schemes. They give you less certainty than defined benefit schemes, but give you much more flexibility. Recommendation would be to start early and don't opt out of the scheme. The norm or the normal contributions currently would be 8% total employee and employer contributions throughout an uninterrupted working life until state pension age. But I'll show you some figures shortly, which would suggest that if you want to retire early, you should be putting quite a bit more than that in. The flip side of that, though, is it's never too late to make additional contributions. I would recommend, while you're still working, even if you're partially retired, still make contributions. And cash flow planning, and I showed you a small example of that earlier, can be helpful to simulate what's possible here. But going back a number of slides, remember that suggested £600,000 pension pot figure for a comfortable retirement. That takes a lot of building up. So how do defined benefit and defined contribution scheme pensions compare? I've done some calculations here based on an individual here at age 22 at the start and earning the UK median salary, which is currently £31,461 a year for a full-time employee. This person is, as a first example, in the civil service alpha scheme, which is a career average scheme, which promises 2.3% of each year's salary added to your pension figure throughout service. As I said, there's a tiered contribution rate, and at this salary level, it's 5.35% for employees. If our person makes it through to age 66, their pension isn't much less than their salary, and they get state pension on top, so a very comfortable retirement. And even at 60, there's a reasonable figure there, which added to state pension would give quite a decent level of retirement income, and the civil servant would always have the option of making additional voluntary contributions as well. However, individual in a workplace scheme, though, you can see the figures are a lot less. This assumes normal contribution rates throughout of 8% total employer and employee, 6% investment growth, 0.75% charges, and I've used the Which pension calculator here. Of course, investment returns could be more or less than that. If this person wanted complete certainty in their retirement and wanted to buy an index-linked annuity, the calculator is showing that from age 60, an index-linked annuity would only give them £4,600 a year. Although, of course, they would have the option of drawdown, and the suggested drawdown maximum figure, unlikely to be sustainable through life, is about £14,000 a year. From 66, an index-linked annuity would give about £7,500 per year, and maximum drawdown of £17,800. So the moral of these figures is that you need to be paying more than the basic as and when you can, especially if you want to retire early. Very few people nowadays are in one job for their entire working life. And often people, especially women, will have gaps in their working life. There is a gender pensions gap as well as a gender pay gap. So it pays to plan ahead and try and plug that gap by paying additional pension contributions whenever you can. So, taking stock of what you've got. Planning for retirement, you're within a few years of retirement. Check your state pension entitlement and catch up contributions if needed. The website's very good and very helpful. Keep track of your pensions from past employments. Let them know if you move. Check that the underlying investments are still suitable in a defined contribution scheme. Make sure you do stay in your workplace scheme to benefit from employer contributions. Employers won't pay into a scheme of your own choosing, and only into their own scheme, and pay additional contributions when you can. And certainly don't opt out. If you're self-employed or a company owner, it's totally up to you to provide for your retirement, which obviously you can do via personal pensions, self-invested personal pensions, or another sort of scheme called a small self-administered scheme. Business owners will often say that their business is their pension, but is that really the case? Surely it makes sense to build up a separate fund apart from your business so you don't have to rely on selling your business to provide you with an income in retirement. And of course, you can save for your retirement in other ways. We're concentrating on pension provision here, but you can save via ISAs, you can save via GIAs, which are general investment accounts in stocks and shares, etc., or via property. The most important thing is to save, but pensions are the most tax efficient way to save. So, new possibilities. What shape will your retirement take? I'm first of all going to look at what shape people's working lives might take. So this is mine. It's possibly similar to a number of people's, especially many women. I started full-time work at age 21, then I worked part-time for a number of years, then back to full-time work in my mid-40s. I currently work part-time again and done quite a lot of studying in recent years, and I hope to do more, probably completely unrelated to my line of work. My pension provision is pretty healthy now, but it's comprised of a number of parts, both some defined contribution and defined benefit, and most of that has built up since I was 45. My husband Keith's working life has been much more straightforward. Perhaps this is the more traditional model of studying, full-time work for 30 plus years, but not retirement, but that's not necessarily the norm nowadays. I call this fall off a cliff retirement, that you're working full-time one day and not working at all the next. Can take a bit of adjustment mentally and emotionally. But what do you want your retirement to look like? This is Steve and Wendy's. Steve and Wendy have been clients of mine for several years now, since a few years before retirement, which they took from about age 66 or so years ago. Steve was actually 66 a couple of weeks ago, so it's now started to get his state pension. They're looking pretty happy, away on holiday, spending time with grandchildren. They've got 3 now, going away in their camper van and doing some charity work. These pictures were taken pre-COVID, I would say. Wendy's involved in helping with a local food bank. Steve had a fall off the cliff retirement, so working full-time one day and not working at all the next. But Wendy transitioned by working part-time for a year or two before finally retiring, and also worked part-time earlier in her career. As well as financial planners, we are life planners. I mentioned in an earlier slide that I was a registered life planner. It's an internationally recognised qualification, and the advisors at Balance Wealth have all undergone some life planning training. What it is proper holistic financial planning, and it's all about working with people to clarify what they would like their lives to be like, and then fitting the money around that. Money is only a means to an end when it comes down to it. To help with that, we ask clients 3 questions. Question 1 is, imagine that you have all the money you need for the rest of your life. How would you live your life? Question 2 is, if you knew that you only had 5 to 10 years left to live, what will you do in your remaining years? And question 3, $64,000 question, you've just been told you've only 1 day left to live. What did you miss? Not get to be, not get to do. What regrets do you have in life, basically? So fairly deep, meaningful questions. And what do people typically answer? The answers fall into 5 categories, really. Say family and relationship goals, spirit and value goals, creativity goals, including possibly new business ventures, community goals, and place and environment goals, having a sense of place. George Kinder, who's the father of life planning, has written a number of books, and one of them, Life Planning for You, is designed for the public rather than financial planners. And these are the answers that clients have given when he's researched for that book. So to try and visualise, to put a bit of a picture behind those goals. So family and relationship goals could mean you want to spend more time with family and friends. You want to help your children buy property, or you want to find a soulmate if you've been working too hard to find one during your earlier years. Spirit and value goals, you might want to lead a more spiritual life. You might want to meditate or just live a simpler life generally. Creativity goals, you might want to write that book, study history, learn to play an instrument. I put crochet there because I've been big on crochet during lockdown. And I was pleased to find that Tom Daly, the Olympic diving championship, has also gone into it. If you look at his Instagram feed, he's done some amazing stuff. I can only really do straight lines, so scarves, etc. Community goals, join in with the community, maybe volunteer, possibly get involved with philanthropy. And place and environment goals, you might want a holiday home somewhere else. You might want a camper van, as with Stephen Wendy, or you might want to save the planet. I have clients who are involved with building an eco house for them to live in at the moment, for example. So Stephen Wendy's goals, for example, were to get and keep fit, and they do, via walking, cycling, running and yoga. To help their children get onto the property ladder, they've done that. Spend as much time as possible with grandchildren, and hopefully they'll be able to do that again. To be an active part of the community, which they have been via food bank, lifeboat institution and other local events. And they have bought a camper van and hope to spend several months a year travelling in it, albeit they can only really travel in the UK at the moment. So really it's all about finding your balance, which is why our company is called that. I do yoga and Pilates classes, and they always talk about challenging your balance, and they get you to stand on one leg, and I'm terrible at that, I must admit. I wobble all over the place. I say that I'm terrible, but the teacher will often say that the wobbling about is the point. You need to concentrate to balance successfully, so you're in the moment. If you can stand as still as a statue on one leg, you should be doing something more challenging. Balance has been difficult to find during lockdown. Our work isn't all about people accumulating wealth. You want to be spending as well on things that you enjoy. Part of our financial planning process is about your financial well-being, both now and in the future. Knowing you have enough of the things you need and want now, but also for all of your future. You might well live to be 100 plus. You don't want an impoverished life then, if you do. And there's a lovely blog which my colleague Lauren has written, which is on the Balance website, all about balance. So you might want to look at that. So, actions to take away with you. Think seriously about what you want to do with the rest of your life, not just financially. Plan what you want to do with your time, be it spending time with family, hobbies, travel, social life, seeing those old friends again, or studying. Check your state pension entitlement and fill gaps if necessary. Think about other possible sources of income, be it part-time work, setting up a new business, or possibly having a rental property. Think about where you want to live. Do you want to downsize or do you want to move abroad? Not at the moment, of course, but one of these days. And definitely collect together details of all your existing pensions. If you've lost track, the pensions tracing service can help, and other investments which you could use to help fund your retirement. And if all this seems a bit much, speak to an independent financial planner who specialises in holistic planning, preferably a life planner. So a little bit more about us. We're a chartered financial planning firm. We are holistic financial planning specialists. We're experts in planning for big lifestyle or financial changes, be it retirement, selling your business, following divorce, etc. We've got lovely offices in West Bridgford, where I actually am at the moment after 15 months of working at home. And we are friendly and available via video calls. Recently, we are starting now COVID-safe face-to-face meetings again. And there's some contact details there. So here are some further resources that could be helpful. The Which website, which has some very good calculators. The Pensions Advisory website, which has got lots and lots of information about pensions. The gov.uk website for checking your state pension. PFS, which is the Personal Finance Society Your Money website, which has got a lot of educational material. The Life Planning for You website, which I mentioned, where you can actually start the life planning process yourself. And there's the Balance Wealth website and the blog about finding balance. And of course, your defined benefit pension schemes members website, if you're fortunate enough to be a member of a scheme. And thank you very much to Steve and Wendy. So that's the end of the formal presentation. So if we have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now. Catherine asks, how do you go about working out a safe withdrawal rate for flexible drawdown? Historically, we always had the rule of 4%. Nowadays, I would suggest that we rely much more on cash flow planning, and actually would sort of formulate an individual strategy for individual clients. And really, we would also, I mean, this webinar is about planning for retirement. We've had separate webinars about in retirement, in which I talk about investment strategies for personal pension funds during drawdown, and actually basically having a low risk pot, a medium risk pot, and a high risk pot. So I would say there's no one answer, but we would rely on cash flow planning to go through that with clients, Catherine. Thank you. Okay, unless we have any more questions, I'll call that a day. As we mentioned, the recording will be available from tomorrow. Thank you all very much for attending. Good evening.